Gentle Ben, Chapter 8. As often happens in the salmon industry, the run stopped completely the next day. For some weird reason unknown to man, the hordes of salmon remained somewhere at sea, far beyond the seniors' nets. The brown bears tramped the stream banks in vain. Finally, hunger drove the Titans back to the long grass of the meadows, to digging roots in the marshy spots and ripping open rotting stumps or rolling rocks along the hillsides in search of small rodents, grubs, and ants. Foxes slunk along the stream, searching for a forgotten dead salmon, or for one that had come too near shore and was marooned in a shallow pool. The clouds of gulls that had hovered over the brown bears, waiting for their leavings, finally returned to the beach. Even the fishing eagle's uncannily sharp eyes could find no salmon as they endlessly cruised low over the spawning streams, screaming out frustration and anger. Clearwater was not discouraged. "This is nothing new. We've been through it before plenty of times. They always hit again. You just wait and see." "We haven't seen a porpoise in a long time," Mark said. "There you are," Clearwater said. "There's your answer. We need to see a porpoise." They saw the porpoise, but it did no good. Mark pointed this out, and Clearwater answered readily. Temporarily postponed, but the run will come. We just got to keep going till it hits again." And so they did. The far north ranged far and wide, but as Mark's father said, we couldn't buy a load for love nor money. They caught just enough barely to pay the gas bill and to feed Ben a few fish on weekends. They kept looking, making sets now when they saw only one or two jumpers. Each time Mark looked anxiously into the pocket when they pulled the seine close, hoping to see thousands of salmon inside. They spent nights anchored in small, quiet bays that Mark's father chose carefully so that Mark could go ashore and practice swimming. Mark worked hard at learning to swim. He had a greater reason than just the promise to his father that he'd learn this summer. He'd wanted to be free of the orange life jacket his father had made him wear at all times when he was on the boat. It was a badge telling everyone in the Sound he couldn't swim. "It's like a billboard," Clearwater said. "It says to everybody, 'Look, there's only half a sailor. We got to get rid of this billboard.'" During these daily lessons his father would sit on the beach or in the bow of the far north and shout advice. Clearwater would strip down to the waist, wade into the water with Mark, with the ever-present beret clamped on his head. He worked with the boy for hours. At first it was a splashing battle just to keep him afloat, and then Mark swam his first 10 feet, and Clearwater praised him lavishly. After that his progress was rapid. Finally came a memorable night when he swam from the shore to the boat, about 100 feet. Clearwater swam beside him all the way, advising him, urging him on. That night his father picked up the hated orange life jacket, smiled at Mark, and said, "Well, guess you don't need this anymore," and he tossed it below onto a bunk. During these dull, fishless days, they made periodic stops at the small store at Butteville, at the town of Chenega, and Valdez, where Mark had made deals with other storekeepers for their old bread and pastry. At each he went ashore, gathered the food into sacks, carried it aboard the far north, where he stowed it below. Because no fishing was allowed on weekends, his father would begin cruising toward Orca City on Friday. They always had a few salmon to deliver, and Mark would have a large load of bread and pastry to store in Kelly's cold room. Mike Kelly had taken to coming aboard the far north and sitting in the galley with Mark's father. They would drink coffee and discuss whether the run was ever going to hit or if this was going to be a lean year. More often than not, when Mark struggled up the stairs with his unwieldy sacks of food, Kelly would meet him at the head of the stairs, tuck a sack under each arm, and tramp off to the cold room with them. Mark always saved half a dozen salmon for Ben, and often, as he trudged off the dock with a sack of fish over his shoulder, Kelly would come beside him, lift the sack, and carry it easily in one hand. "I'm going uptown anyway," he'd say. "I might as well carry something. You look tired. Did you have a rough week, Mark?" Mark decided Kelly must have a lot of business in town. The big man was there almost every time he came off the boat with a sack of fish for Ben. But before Kelly took care of his business, he usually carried the fish up the hill and laid them on their back porch. The first time Mark objected, he explained to Kelly, "Dad said Ben is my responsibility. I have to do all the work." "Well, your dad's right," Kelly agreed, and you have assumed the responsibility like a man. As for the work, you don't mind sharing a little, do you? There's still plenty left to do, from what your dad tells me, and you're really doing me a favor letting me pack this sack up the hill. A man should have a certain amount of exercise, you know. I should climb this hill every day just to keep slim and trim, but I won't do it unless I have a reason. Well, this gives me my reason. Mark explained to his mother how Kelly felt about it when she surprised the big man putting the sack down on the porch. He's really quite a person, isn't he? She said, ruffling Mark's hair. Yes, Mark said. He says they get a silver salmon now and then and a load of pinks, and they can't eat 'em, so he's going to put them in the cold room for Ben this winter. 10 days before the season was to end, the run suddenly hit again. It was during this time that Mark saw the pirate boat. They were returning from Orca City, where they had delivered a load of salmon, and they were cruising off Constantine Harbor early one morning. In the distance, Clearwater spotted the gray and black shape of a boat against a bank. It was partially hidden by overhanging brush. A pirate with a full load on, sure as shootin', Clearwater said, studying the boat through the glasses. Mark's father looked and agreed. I know that boat. Mark asked excitedly if he could see, and his father handed him the glasses. Through the powerful lenses, the pirate boat jumped close, clear in every detail. She lay low in the water, a sure sign she was loaded with fish. A man was taking down sacks from over the pilot house windows. Sacks hung over the bow, hiding the nameplate. The man taking the sacks turned and glanced towards the far north, and Mark saw the dark, blunt features, the wide, thick-lipped mouth. Dad, he said, it's Fog Benson. I know, Carl Anderson said grimly. Clearwater shoved back his beret and said, it was foggy last night and kind of dark. Perfect for a pirate to lift a trap. He ain't come far from the trap this early in the morning. What's the most logical trap to lift around here? 6 Fathom Johnson's Windy Point pile trap, Mark's father said. The trap shack's on shore 200 yards away. Perfect for a pirate. If they know he did it, why can't they arrest him? Mark asked. Knowing and proving are 2 different things, Clearwater answered. Probably no one saw him rob the traps, or if they did, won't say so because he bought 'em off. Once the fish are in the hold of a pirate boat, there's no way to identify him as coming from any certain trap. How does a pirate rob a trap, Clearwater? Well, he operates best on dark or foggy nights. He'll block the windows of his boat so no light shows, and he'll cover up the nameplate when he sneaks up on the trap. If he's clever and quiet, he might dip out every fish in the trap without waking the watchman. Or he might make a deal with the watchman. He might buy him off by offering them 5 or 10 cents a fish if they'll let him steal it. The watchman knew then just stay in the shack and see nothing and hear nothing during the robbery. The pirate can slip the money under the door as he leaves. What if the watchman refuses to sell to the pirates? Well, in that case, if the pirate really wants the fish, he's going to sneak in, fire a couple shots through the trap shack roof. He'll yell at the watchman, warning them not to come out. Then he'll stand guard with a rifle while his crew robs the traps. Has Fog Benson shot at watchmen? Oh, yeah, they say he has. Mark bet he would. Anyone who would be mean to Ben like he was, who'd starve him for almost 5 years, would do anything mean. An hour later, they pulled to the Windy Point trap. The top watchman and 6 Fathom Johnson were standing on the trap walkway, surveying the damage the pirate had done. The netting of the spiller was slashed to ribbons where the pirate had cut it to get at the trapped salmon. Johnson came to meet them. He was a tall, raw-boned old man with a great shock of snow-white hair. They lifted my trap last night, he yelled angrily, waving a long, lean arm. There was 10,000 in there. He snapped his long fingers and looked at the spiller. Slashed it with a knife to get at him. $500 worth of damage. If it's a cent, I'll take at least 2 days to patch it. 2 days fishing I lose. Clearwater said, we spotted Fog Benson taking sacks off his pilot house windows about an hour back. He had a big load. Johnson nodded ponderously. I figured that's who it was. He's taken me before, I know it, but I can't prove it. He lowered his voice and he tipped his white head toward his 2 watchmen. I can't prove they sold out to him last night either, but I know that too. I'll bet they've got $1,000 cash under here someplace. How'd you get here so soon? Mark's father asked. Oh, they called the cannery shortwave early this morning and reported it. all incident and everything. The cannery called me, and I came out by boat. I just got to sell this trap, Carl. I'm too old to guard it myself, and I can't seem to hire honest watchmen." "I know," Mark's father said. "It's a good trap, one of the best in the Sound. If I didn't have the far north—" "I'd rather you had it than anybody else," Johnson said. "Your daddy and me was good friends. You been a good friend too, but I understand. Oh well, maybe somebody'll buy it. Anyway, I might as well finish out the season with these two. It's too late to hunt for new watchmen, and they won't dare sell 'em to Benson, so I'll make a little something. You hear if anybody wants to buy a good trap, tell 'em, okay?" "I'll do that." The Far North backed from the Windy Point trap and resumed combing the sea for salmon. They got 2 more big loads and wound up with a smaller one. The season ended as quickly as it started. On the last day, they were cruising off Bly Island, hoping for one more set. Mark was spotting alone in top of the pilot house when his father said, "6 o'clock, Mark. The season just ended. Come on down." It had been a good season for Carl Anderson and the crew of the Far North. They had come in with 7 big loads and 2 half-a-loads. They had made their year's wages in 1 short month. "That's good," Clearwater said. "You make it big, or go hungry all year, and you borrow from the cannery to live, then hope to pay it back the next season." The end of the fishing season brought swift changes in the North. Almost overnight, the 1,100 seniors that had come from as far south as Mexico waters disappeared from Orca City's bay and from the Sound. Suddenly, there was only a dozen or so boats left in the harbor. Up and down the coast the cannery's doors closed. Ocean-going ships stopped at each cannery, and the year's catch was loaded aboard for transport to the United States. The floating traps were hauled from their locations at sea and left on the beaches for the winter. The pilings were pulled from the sea bottom to leave the location clear for navigation. The hundreds of cannery workers who had jammed Orca City's one mud and boardwalk street left by boat and plane. Once again, Orca City was a small, almost deserted fishing village of some 300 or 400 people. Ellen took Mark to Dr. Walker. He had grown an inch, and he'd added on 10 pounds. He was brown and tough. "A good, healthy specimen and ready for winter," Dr. Walker said. Ben has also grown. He'd added several hundred pounds, and his coat was taffy gold. He, too, was well prepared for the winter sleet. Mark had done really well in his food collection for Ben. He had a huge pile of bread and old pastries packed into Mike Kelly's cold room. And true to his promise, Mike had frozen 39 extra silver salmon that had got into the nets. Mark thanked Kelly and offered to work a couple of extra Saturdays at the cannery to pay for them. "Not necessary," Kelly said. "Those were extras, as I told you before. We couldn't can 'em anyway. That Ben is going to be surprised when you give him a salmon along about Christmas. I'll bet he's the only brownie in the world that'll get a fish when he wakes up in the middle of winter. That guy not only looks like a king, he lives like one." Mark grinned. "I'll tell him you put them in there for him." "You do that," Kelly said. School started. The daylight hours started falling away with much speed. Fall was rushing upon the north, pushed by the long winter months behind it. Geese began going over, heading south in long, high-flying V's. Their excited babbling drifted down from great heights. Swans passed over, slow and ponderous. Their bodies and long necks stretched to full length. Ducks congregated by noisy millions. The year-round inhabitants of the north were preparing themselves for the long winter months. The snowshoe rabbits, the ptarmigans, the foxes, the weasels. They were turning white to blend in to the white landscape soon to come. The alder, blueberry, and willow leaves, touched by fall's first chill, turned rich yellow, brown, and red, and fell whispering into the long, dry meadow grasses until bushes and trees were bare. With surprising swiftness, the snow line crept back from the distant white mountains. It was stopped at the edge of the water. Mark was aware of the approach of winter, but he paid little attention. It was a subtle, steady advance with no sudden, dramatic change. The daylight hours became a little less each day. The winds had a tang and a bite. His summer shirt and light sweater gave way to a heavy sweater and cloak. He had lived with them all his life. But the full realization of winter came the day he ran down the trail from school and burst through the door into Ben's shed. The new window they had installed gave plenty of light, but he did not see Ben. The chain lay stretched across the floor, and his eyes followed it to where it disappeared in the hay at a corner of the room. There Mark had dug down and found Ben, a great taffy gold bundle curled up into a ball. He lay so still and his breathing was so shallow and slow that for a sickening instant Mark feared that he was dead. Then suddenly he knew. He sat there looking at Ben, held in motionless awe by this miracle of nature. The hay was his den. Ben had begun his long winter's sleep. And that's the end of chapter 8.